And gentlemen, it is that time again. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please make some noise? This is Legacy Rewind. And backed by popular demand, all the way from over there where they from. Would you please make some noise for our senior leaders? Dr. Faith and Pastor Soso are in the building.
Thank you so much.
How y'all doing?
Good.
Doing good. Oh, look, double time.
Yeah.
Double good.
Good.
Yes.
Really?
It's
Great.
the end of the day, so a little sleepy, but
Yes.
other than that, we're good.
Good. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
I think I'm adjusting to waking up so early again for the kids.
I was just about to say.
Yeah.
School's back in session.
School's back in session, and that
How are
means
you
the
doing?
parents are back in session.
Ah, sir, that is a good question. We're doing well though.
Good.
You know, we are at all year round school, so we've been like on the go since mid-July. So it's a different pace, but it's good though. Thank you for
Thank
asking.
God.
So you know, when we have these conversations, you know, I run into people all over the place, and there was and we have, and Pastor Tim, huge shout out to Pastor Tim, one of those executive producers. We have a range of individuals who love the rewind, and so someone was just asking about this new installment of the series Seeds that we're in. Let me ask you on something. I don't know if anyone's ever asked, how are you feeling about your delivery so far?
Well, I mean, we always give each other feedback, and yeah, I think feeling good.
Yeah, I don't feel any different. But I think this is the second time somebody has asked about the delivery.
Yeah.
Somebody
This
has,
week.
yeah. And so maybe there's something in the air. Maybe we need to ask, what it is. I guess the person was asking about how people are receiving it, and if it's too heavy for people receiving it. And I said, I don't know, that we feel led to share, and we're sharing.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think?
So I have to say, not that we wasn't gonna tell them the truth, right, Pastor Tim? I have to say, this week I've been more emotional.
Wow.
After the sermon?
Yeah, like so here, y'all know me, and y'all can type in the comments, what was your favorite part? What's caused your heart to start tugging? And you asked me this question. You started off with this scripture, 2 Corinthians 9:8. And I don't know if y'all remember when we was in Africa. Yeah, we went to Africa, y'all. I don't know if y'all knew that. When we was in Africa, one of our first devotionals.
And he swam across the lake.
Yeah,
y'all remember that?
Yeah.
We'll get into that. Y'all, I know y'all want to know.
Mm.
But you started this week's installment off with this scripture, and I don't know if y'all know this or not, but I don't know, you all are scholars, and y'all know the Bible. I ran into this scripture a couple years ago, Pastor Tim, and I don't know why I just couldn't get away from it. And so I want to read this because you said this, and it just really started provoking me. It's 2 Corinthians 9:8. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, that ye always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work. I really want to make sure I'm understanding this the right way, because I don't know if y'all ever been in class with Pastor So he plays no games. We want to make sure that we understand things right. Help me understand this, Pastor. Does this scripture mean that God's expectation for us is to have abundance and sufficiency in all things?
In all things, I think first spiritually, that's Christ's primary goal, to make sure that we're liberated spiritually and restored back to the Father. But in addition to that, the fullness of God's work doesn't just end in the spiritual.
Okay.
It also transcends into the natural, emotional, psychological, in our relationships, in all things. Now, that doesn't mean that in all things and all time all of us are there at the same time. That's not what it means.
Okay.
It does mean, though, that at the very least, in the collection of people as a church, we should have all things available in the church. Remember, we're all built together into one body, is church. And so what you don't have, I should have, at the very least, right? And so as a church put together, everything we need to be sufficiently effective and fruitful in every good work should be available in a local church.
Wow.
And then there's a maturation that comes from we sharpening our skills and becoming better and becoming more fruitful so that we can even be more fruitful at more times individually.
Yeah.
I want to hear what you, the psychology, Dr. Faith, you are always so in the presence. And I don't know if you're going to bill us for this or not. If she does, y'all make sure y'all hit her cash app right. This is for real, legit psychologist. Can you give us the psychology behind all sufficiency? Some people can struggle with certain imposter syndromes, not knowing how to steward or have, or even the thought about, am I supposed to have this or not? Or I'm feeling insecure because I don't have this. Can you give us clarity on the psychology about sufficiency?
Yeah. Join us this Sunday as we culminate the series, and we're talking about mindset, and we're talking about abundance mindset, and one of those traits being self-worthiness, right, and feeling worthy of every good thing that the Father has for you, and feeling worthy of being provided for. So when you're thinking about experiences, maybe some people grew up where they had to provide for themselves, always took care of everything, and now you get in a kingdom where you have a Father, and the Father is saying, I own everything. If you would only believe, I want you to have prosperity if you only put in the work, right? And so learning how to rewire our thinking about our self-worth, but also our thinking about who God is. So we're gonna get into that a little bit on Sunday.
Look, that's a nugget. Y'all need to come. Make sure y'all be there 9 and 11, right? I think that's part of the reason why, and I'll just speak for myself, from my own experience. Well, when you go back over this and you're looking and you're preparing to have this conversation, I became so emotional. Your illustration with the tree and the prunes, I don't know about y'all, I just started seeing myself, and it reminded me, when you start cutting away at things, it reminded me of Jesus' parable in Luke 13. And so there's this parable Jesus explains, like this owner and this vine dresser, and he comes, and for 3 years he comes to this tree and it's not producing. And then he goes to the vine dresser again and says, hey man, cut that tree down, throw it in the fire. And the vine dresser says, hold on, give me 1 more year. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to dig around it. I'm going to he calls it manure it. And I can imagine being a tree, that's not a good feeling. Like the things and the processes that has to happen for growth to have to happen was not good. And so and when I start seeing you like cut away at these things, I'm just sitting there looking at myself like, man, that does hurt. Help someone who's being very introspective and self-reflective when they start seeing you with pruners and shears. Bring us into a safe space with this safe illustration.
I don't know if there's safe space. I told you, you're going to be cut anyways.
Yes.
So there is no safe space. You're either going to be cut away completely, or you're going to be cut into fruitfulness. So I would first of all remove the idea of safety. And maybe that's the reason why people ask about the delivery of the sermon, because I'm like, there's no hiding.
Yes.
You're going to be cut regardless.
But the more still you are, the easier it is.
It is. I love that. I love that. It's
Wait a minute. We got to be still and take the cutting.
Yes. Because it's the worst if a surgeon is about to cut at you and you're still moving on that board, right?
Look, I grew up with I was physically encouraged to act right. Move your hand. We got whipped, Pastor Tim. We wasn't staying still. So we got to stay still.
You got to stay still while the pruning is happening, so you don't accidentally get cut in a place you ain't supposed to get cut, or something doesn't get cut off that was not meant to get cut off.
I love that,
because you've been moving.
I love that. But I would say really that the safe space is to be still, like Dr. Faith has just mentioned, being still and say, God, you operate on me and take off everything that is not worthy at this time. I think that's the safe space, because if you move too much, you could mistakenly be cut where you don't want to be cut. But if you move out of position and you're not fruitful, then you are cut off. And I mean, myself, I'm dwelling on that scripture. I think that it is something that we need to really spend time thinking. And it's not one time Jesus mentioned the issue of the parable, right?
Yeah.
He came hungry to the fig tree and he cursed it because there was no fruit on it, right? And so fruitfulness in God is really, really important. it's a key criteria.
Yeah.
And as believers, if we're not bearing fruit spiritually, but again, now because we're in the series of the seeds and more so in our finances, our wealth, and what have you, it is something that we have to take really seriously, that at some point, if you don't bear fruit, God may cut you off. You may not die, but God may just cut off the source.
Yeah.
Right. And many people have lost opportunities, life changing opportunities, because they never were fruitful in those opportunities. And maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the fruitfulness of obedience, how it yields more fruit. And if God has been trying to prune us, right, even telling us what to do in an area of obedience, and we don't listen, when we think of cutting off, like you said, it's not necessarily, okay, you're just going to help, but he may not.
Right.
When his voice gets cut off from your life in a particular area, because you still haven't yielded to the direction, you haven't obeyed to the leading, you might as well be dead, right? Yes. Like, and so when we're thinking about that whole, he's not gonna make you do anything. Yeah. He's gonna give you insight and wisdom on how to behave and conduct yourself, but he will never bend your will. He doesn't bend our will. And so when we become so adamant about doing our own thing, that's a way of us being fruitless and also cutting off the voice of the Father.
Yeah. I'm just been thinking about this, and when I hear you say that, the expectation of our productivity to God, I think is extremely vital to him. Like it's like a non-negotiable. We opened a series about the talents. You were talking about the talents, and you could at least you brought up those 5 talents, those ones, and we buried it, or we didn't produce anything. You could at least put it in the bank and produce some type of interest. And sometimes I believe I don't know if we don't think that God is really expecting for us to produce, but when he comes back, like the vine dresser, he's like, hey, you haven't produced anything. Yes. He curses it, like you said, he curses the fig tree. So I think we are all, and y'all type in those comments, we're all being extremely reflective about, am I producing? Or is this the third time that God came around and was expecting something and there was nothing? So, oh my goodness, you have me so emotional.
We need to talk about measuring productivity, because I think we can easily move into striving, right? Which is just doing. You can be doing and not producing. And so when you look at your life, you want to look at your level of impact. So I'm thinking about the ladies who work in the cafe here on our Connect team, right? And a couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting with our core leaders plus some of their main folks, and we shared some testimonies of people's lives being transformed. I think a lot of times, if you're just making sure the fruit is cut and the fruit is set up and all of that, you may not feel like you're producing as much fruit as someone who's maybe singing or preaching, but you don't know what points of connection are happening outside around your fruit. Yeah. Like you don't know what the hospitality of the church, the house is doing to somebody who's coming from a chaotic house. So I want people to think about fruitfulness from a place of service and then a bigger picture, right? So when anytime at Legacy, we're sharing testimonies of lives changed, that's you. If you're serving, if you're a legacy builder, if you are, partaking in any, you're bearing fruit. Yeah. And the cool thing about my kids, or about being a King's kid, is that, they get to partake in some of the fruit of my life, and they ain't worked at all, right? And so when you're part of a house, there is fruitfulness that comes from the top. Yeah. But the whole house is, the whole tree is blossoming. Yeah. And everybody has access.
I love that.
That's so interesting you bring that up. We were actually on our way into work early this morning. I was having a conversation with one of our pastors here, and we were talking about inviting another person. And the person said, I want to go to y'all's Bible study. Wow. The Bible study is really going to tell me about what the church is really like. And then after they was at the Bible study, they enjoyed it so much. People sometimes, whatever in our mind, we may not put the investment in the Bible study like we do in the Sunday morning service. But this person came out and was like, I enjoyed this so much. I enjoyed the fruit that was produced from Bible study. It's making me want to come to Sunday service. So I love how you brought that. That's assimilated to connect. So all y'all who are serving and working know that our obedience and producing, that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Random question. Have you ever cut the grass?
Yes, I used to, and I loved it.
Really?
I loved cutting the grass. But when I got married, I passed that task on.
Really? When I was growing up, we used to have a neighbor across our street. He would lay down on his side, and he would cut with shears. He would go through the grass and look through the weeds. He would be looking for the weeds.
Do you have his number? I need him going through my weeds.
Look, we've lived in neighborhoods where there's grass competitions, all right? And each guy is talking to the other guy. All they talk about is grass. You know, so your fescue. Oh, okay, what is it? Is it how much water? Okay, and what formula did you put in the spray? So we know all about that type of neighbor.
But I've never seen that kind of neighbor.
I mean, he
on the side.
Well, other neighbor took all of his old grass off. Yeah. And then he rejuvenated the soil.
Wait a minute.
Then he replanted. I mean, he did his grass is like carpet.
A grass toupee.
Yes, a whole new grass
lacement.
You'd have never known it wasn't there this whole time. Yeah.
So I bring this up because Pastor Sosa, you said this. You said every time you commit something to the ground, weeds grow.
Weeds grow.
And there are threats to your seed in the ground, or in the growth phase. Talk to us about this process of weeds growing. And you said something else that I never heard anybody. I've always associated weeds with a negative thing.
Wow.
And so first, talk to us about this process of weeds growing and us committing things to the ground. What do we need to know about weeds, first of all?
So I think that weeds were never originally part of God's plan for our lives. I think it's a result of the fall, right? You go back to Genesis, the curse on Adam was out of the sweat of his brow he shall eat, and thorns and thistles the earth shall bring to him. And so this is part of the fallen nature, right? That thorns and undesirable plants will grow out of the ground, and so you have to do the work of separating the good from the bad. That's the reality of what we are in right now. Now, if God spoke, right, just like anything else, everything listens and it lasts for eternity. God doesn't have to re-speak that. It's already happening. And so in reality, in the soil, even barren soil without anything, right? You see that there's no growth there, but once you start bringing in water and you start nurturing, all of a sudden, you see undesirable things that you didn't plant, right? They're in the atmosphere, they're in the ground, they're everywhere, right? So they just sprout. Now, what does that tell us? That tells us that within the context of world we live in right now, and it reminds us of an anticipation of the hope that we have in eternity, that there will be no more pain and none of this. So in my view, that's a pointer of what we missed in the beginning, but also what we're looking forward to, an anticipation of what we're going to see. But in reality, it helps us as believers with a foresight to understand that, well, if this is an expectation, I got to make provision for the weeds. I cannot just plant without making provisions for the weeds. If I know that the weeds will always be there, in a relationship, there will be weeds. In business, there'll be weeds. In raising my kids, there'll be weeds. In my business, anything, there will be weeds. If I know that, then I make provision for it. And I watch out and I look out for it. Like you said, you see those manicured grass? It's not that they don't have weeds. They just made provisions.
They just know how to treat it.
They made provisions for it.
You said weeds compete with plants for sunlight, water, and resources. So then our question would be, how do we prepare for the weeds that are growing? Because weeds also grow. Something happened. The growth process is I guess not judgmental. It's going to grow on the good or on the bad side. There's going to be growth. How do we prepare, or what's our process and plan to address the weeds?
I think you have to spot the weeds first. And it's interesting because when you look at spiritual weeds, the parable of the sower, Jesus said, hey, do not take out the weeds, because by taking out the weeds, the weeds and the tares, you may inadvertently take out healthy plants, which means sometimes in some situations you manage the situation, you let the weeds grow with the plants. But in other times you have to be able to spot. I think the best thing to do is train your eyes to see seed as different from weed, because sometimes we don't know, right? Can you tell your plants different from weeds? Can you tell that this is not what I planted? Can you tell that this is not what I'm expecting to get? I know what I planted in my life. This ain't it. Yep. And being able to differentiate what weeds are from real seeds and real plants is the number one step towards overcoming that.
Yeah, I think that's so good, because weeds to me are just distractions. And so if you are focused and you have planted seeds of faithfulness in, I don't know, in with your children.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to go to school or whatever. Instead of you focusing on the weed, you focus on what you planted. No, I've planted righteousness in this kid. I've planted obedience in this kid. And so instead of me getting so distracted about trying to uproot this weed, let me go ahead and focus on the seed. Let me focus on what I've already been building, whatever I've already been planting. So they're just distractions, and that's why they grow together. And I think I love the idea of the wheat and the tare. The Lord tells us just let them grow together. That's like in a church. There are gonna be some tares, all right, in a church on your team, right? But the number one thing is not always, oh, let's remove them or let's get them out of here. How do you deal with distractions? How do you deal with someone with an opposing vision, with an opposing assignment or whatever? Are you still able to grow despite that?
Yeah.
Wow. So we're going to talk about this tomorrow night.
I love that.
Because we're talking to the leaders. We're talking to the ministry leaders, right? About growing in capacity.
I love that. And perhaps the reason why Jesus is also saying, do not take out the weeds is because sometimes the weeds grow so interconnected with the plants and the actual seeds that by trying to take out the weeds, you take out the plants.
Yeah.
And in our lives, sometimes in the business, by trying to stop one thing or trying to cut off one thing, you inadvertently stop or cut off the right thing in your life. Relationships, I've seen times where people trying to manage one relationship, they break another one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, could you just let it be? You don't have to try to stop one relationship, but from stopping that relationship, you lose another relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just let the weeds grow in with the wheat, but those are exceptional cases.
I remember we growing up, and we would run through our grass, and we would pick up all these little dandelions and all these things, and we'd be like, I got these bunch of flowers, and we would go in our ignorance. We didn't know that what we were grabbing was the weeds from the flowers or from the grass.
I love that.
And we grab these things as an aesthetic and thinking that I'm giving someone this gift, and what I'm actually giving them is the weeds.
But not all weeds are ugly, right? I did a whole tablescape because I didn't have enough flowers. I went in the back of my woods and I went and found these fern weeds. They just keep growing, and I put them in my flower arrangement. And so and even the dandelions, they're so easy to pick up, right? They're not like some of the weeds that are so deeply rooted. You got to use that whole shovel to pick. I think those are the ones that you really need to be mindful of, because they're going to get into your system and they're going to mess up everything. But the ones that you can just pick up and go, pick them up and go. If they're a cute little flower, blow the dandelion, keep it moving. The key for me is just not to get distracted.
I love that. Not to get distracted. And I just want to quickly add to this. That means that not all weeds are bad.
This is okay. Right? Help me with this, because I've never heard this
before. Because if we're only looking to remove bad weeds, we will miss apparently good things that are distractions. And so to be really fruitful, if God called you to plant whatever He called you to plant, in the field of fruitfulness, you will see some good things.
But you got to stay focused.
That you need to remove, because even though they are good, they're a distraction to what God has called you to. Remember, weeds are not necessarily bad things. They are just undesirable.
And they're growing in a space where something else should be growing.
That's just what it is.
So you have to make sure that there's no competition for what you've originally planted to grow.
See, what's native to me, I've always heard, or I've always maybe I just assumed that weeds were a bad thing. But you made this statement right here along with this. You said the positive thing you're trying to do in your life may not be native to your generational track. This is a major bar right here. Y'all listen to this right here, because we need some explanation behind this. You gave this perspective about there are things that have been growing that sometimes are native to our generation or to our bloodline. Whether it's I've serving in schools, I've learned dysfunction. The act of dysfunction is more prominent than function.
Yes.
Or the broken families are more popular than the way that families God designed them.
I love that.
Can you give us clarity to the native perspective that you were talking about here?
So what is native are things that we either learn, talk about our will, emotions, and our intellect. Things that we learn, acquire either hereditary, hereditary. I can't that word sometimes.
Hereditary,
by
yes,
hereditary, or by learning. By whatever we do. But what happens then is when take for instance, you take a child from a rough neighborhood and they have all of the struggles and whatever inside of them. You take them to a different place, take them to some of the best schools, right? In front of fields of hope and aspiration and what have you. That child, you cannot just say, well, because you've taken that child out of one environment and put him in an environment, it automatically would be good.
Right.
What is native to that child is not the new environment. What has always been in him will show. That's how you say, it's from time to time you'll be problematic in class and could be problematic in class and all of those. So it is more natural for the child to act in dysfunction than to be functional.
Yeah.
So you have to remove then what is the weeds that are in him when you put him in a new space. And I think that that's something that we all need to understand, even coming from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light.
Yeah.
The things that we naturally gravitate towards that are easier for us to do are not godly things. They're not things of the spirit. They are things of the flesh, the carnal things. And so we have to be aware of that and pay attention to remove those weeds in our lives as we run towards the Father.
Yeah, I mean, like simply your native family line may be divorce and broken marriages, but you are building a marriage. We're just talking to our pastors, and they've been married over almost 20 years or over 20 years now, but their parents didn't see that. But so they had to operate in an opposite way in order to create a new norm, right? I had given her daughter a word about having a beautiful marriage because they've created new soil. Right. And so, if you come from a background where poverty is the norm, it's going to take time to rewire your thinking. Yeah. Survival is the norm.
I love that.
Yeah. Not that I'm going to give y'all extra. We was in Bible study this week and we were talking about the normalcy of wrong ways of thinking, even about thinking about rest. And you were like pulling that in. I'm just thinking about the norm of dysfunction that we've created in culture and then changing our perspective. Even like with this series right here, there's such a psychology about money and the fear of money, or the fear of resources, and the fear of how we steward those things. But I think what I'm assuming everyone, and you all type in the chat what y'all experiencing, you all are really digging up some things in some soil in our lives that we really have to look in the mirror and say, okay, help me. Which brings me back to this as we're rounding up right here.
Are we at the spa?
Look,
are we headed to the spa?
The spa. The practical application of this. I can't get away from this. You said this, Pastor. You said we have to come to terms with this. Why would God cut me? Why would God cut that thing? And we all know whatever that thing is that we felt like God took away from me. And sometimes some of us even said, I feel like God doesn't love me anymore because of this process that we started off talking tonight, that we just gonna have to be cut. Can you give us simple, practical applications about this process of growth, this process of being cut, and getting to the normalcy of this growth?
I love that. God cuts whatever is preventing you from being fruitful. Look at it that way. So you're looking at it. Let's not look at it from a reactionary perspective. Let's look at it from a proactive. That every time God cuts something, that thing must have been preventing me from being successful. Because remember, God only cuts in two ways. It cuts to make you more fruitful, or it cuts to remove you from the vine.
Even if it's a family member?
It cuts to make you more fruitful, or it cuts to remove
if that
you from
family
the
member is on your mind all the time, is taking all your money, taking all your energy, you're worried about them all the time, it's abusive, right?
A child
cut will make you more fruitful. Now, God's not gonna have you cut your child,
or maybe
right?
adult child,
but I'm just an adult child, yes, because not only do you need to be more fruitful by trusting God more, they need to grow in fruitfulness by being responsible. Right. So grown parents always struggle with this. Like my 18-year-old, my 21-year-old is out there. They don't want to listen. They don't want to. You need to trust God. And by getting cut in that area, your area of fruitfulness is going to be trust. Like, do you really trust him to care for this kid, even though it's extremely difficult?
Remember, this is the spot, but we're going to take it a little bit to Bible study. Remember, Abraham was going to be cut. God said, I will make you fruitful. And he gave him Isaac. And God said, this very thing that I gave you, which was supposed to be the seed, the fruit,
the promise,
I want to cut it. Give it back to me. And Abraham was ready for the cut. I think that oftentimes the biggest thing is we're not ready to release anything to God. And because Abraham was ready to release, God said, God don't need to cut you. It doesn't delight in your pain. But sometimes if the pain is what you need to be fruitful, God has to deliver the pain to you. But if you do not need pain to be fruitful, you will escape pain. And I think that we have to learn to really become so yielded to God that God doesn't have to cut us for us to be fruitful. The reason why God cuts us is because we have something preventing us from being fruitful.
And even if, and sometimes it's our mindset, right? We got to wrap up, and this can be my spa, because we're saying God only cuts us to be more fruitful, and because something is preventing us from being more fruitful. And sometimes we think that that's a real thing. And I shared the testimony on Wednesday. For me, it was simply just cutting one little thought. And a new thought budded up. And now I can move and act in a totally different way. So it's not, it was fine. I wasn't going to go any further until that one way of thinking got trimmed off so that the new way of thinking could come, But the other thing is God cuts because he loves us, right? Like my neighbor's dog needs to be groomed all the time because she's very hairy. And if her dog parents didn't love her, they would leave her be in the heat with all of that hair, just suffering, trying to manage. Right now, I'm sure back in the day the hair naturally fell off, but they go and they trim her because they love her. They go and they trim that hair off so that she can enjoy her summer, so that she can be more fruitful. Not that fruitful, right? But so God cuts us because he loves us.
I love that.
It sounds like his focus is not even the cut, but the growth.
The multiplication.
I love that. I love that.
Listen, I know you all have enjoyed this. You all stop me in the middle of the day and talk about these conversations that we have. Make sure you are hashtagging how much you love Legacy Rewind. We're giving a huge shout out to our pastors. They come by
sharing it so that we want to make sure that you love it enough for us to keep going. Like, is this useful? Are you sharing it? Are you sharing it with your friends?
So good.
Yes. So listen, Pastor Tim, what we got coming up this week? I heard we got a leadership gathering Friday.
Tomorrow night.
Another spot.
August 23rd.
August 23rd, leaders. So you called to be a leader. If you called to be a leader of any kind, make sure you find your way here. This is free.
Free. Coaching.
You are so giving. Y'all are giving major master class. Well, I shouldn't say just giving it away. You're investing. You're sowing seeds of leadership in the people. Make sure you are here. Also, Growth Track
Accelerator.
Look, Growth Track Shift and Accelerator. Make sure you are here for Growth Track. And always Sundays, we got not just one, but two services. Two services we winding up here on Legacy Rewind. We can't thank you enough for coming by and sharing sharing Legacy Rewind. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please make some noise for our amazing senior leaders, Dr. Faith and Pastor So. Hey, this has been Legacy Rewind. We'll see you when we see you.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.